Penguin Random House Audio presents The Go-Giver Influencer, a little story about a most persuasive idea, by Burg and John David Mann, read by the authors. Introduction. It's hard to believe it's been a full decade since the first few copies of The Go-Giver stepped onto the bookshelves to state their message and see if the world was interested in reading about Pindar's paradox, that the more you give, the more you have. Turned out, the world was. Most books enjoy an initial surge of sales and interest, and then taper off to a relatively quiet life in the wings, the backlist, as publishers call it. With The Go-Giver, things went rather in the opposite direction. With each succeeding year, rather than diminishing, interest seemed to keep growing and growing. Something about the book seemed to touch a chord, often in the most unexpected places. Originally positioned as a business book, our little story about a powerful business idea began showing up in book clubs, community groups, sermons, and high school classrooms, as well as in boardrooms and sales and service trainings. CEOs and thought leaders were quoting it. It started becoming not simply popular, but influential. In 2015, our publisher brought out a new expanded edition of the book, with a foreword and introduction, a discussion guide for readers groups, additional commentary, and a curious feature on the back jacket that to us was both fascinating and significant. The handful of endorsements there were bracketed by a pair of quotes from Arianna Huffington and Glenn Beck, not two people whose views you typically expect to find on the same page, whether metaphorically or, as in this case, literally. Which brings us to the reason for the book you're now holding in your hands, and the true meaning and value of influence.
The idea of influence has been at the center of all three Go-Giver books to date. In The Go-Giver, Sam Rosen, the beaming, white-haired insurance man, explains to Joe that grasping the true nature of influence became the key to his success, and that people typically get it backwards. If you asked most people what creates influence, what would they say? Joe's answer came without hesitation. Money, position, maybe a history of outstanding accomplishments. Sam nodded, grinning. Ha! You're right. That's exactly what they'd say. And they'd have it exactly backwards. Those things don't create influence. Influence creates them. He also defined what he called the law of influence. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. In Go-Givers Sell More, the third of its 5 parts, the keystone at the center of the book's arch, expounded and expanded on that law and how it works in everyday real-life operation. In The Go-Giver Leader, in a chapter entitled The Substance of Influence, Aunt Elle, that book's mentor figure, offers up this definition of influence. Well, she said, hitching forward eagerly in her seat, the word influence means an unseen flow of power. It was first used in the Middle Ages, believe it or not, as an astrological term, from an old French word meaning a streaming ethereal power from the stars acting upon our character or destiny. Imagine that. By the 15th century, the word was being used to mean an exercise of personal power by human beings. You could say it describes how we exert gravitational force on each other, like stars.
We thought Sam, Aunt Elle, and the rest had pretty well summed it up. But the world moves on, and its needs change and evolve. If Pindar and his friends were here today, we wondered, participating in the world of 2018, what would they say? What would they want to write about? Influence, we thought for sure, but perhaps more specifically about the role influence plays in the capacity for empathy and civil discourse. At its heart, The Go-Giver Influencer is a story about what it takes to bridge differences, to settle disputes and defang conflicts, to find common ground where there appear to be only irreconcilably polarized positions. And yes, even to negotiate business dealings.
It is also about what it takes to be the kind of person whom others come to trust, a person to whom others look for sound guidance, clear judgment, and, in times of challenge, even-handed wisdom. A person, in other words, of genuine influence. In recent years, the term influencer has come into widespread usage, a development we greatly appreciate. The more society explores the nature and significance of positive influence, the better off our world becomes. We thought Pindar's friends would have something uniquely Pindarian to say about that, and we hope that once you've arrived at the final toast that closes this story, you'll agree. Bob Burg and John David Mann, January 2018.
Chapter 1. Jackson. Jackson Hill looked like a man waiting to see the executioner. "Are you sure you won't have some coffee?" The young woman at the reception desk had already offered him coffee, a soft drink, and water in that order. "I'm good, thanks, though." He liked her energy. The nameplate on her desk said Maribel. Perfect, thought Jackson. That's exactly what I need today, a miracle. He glanced at the wall clock. 10 after. 11 now. It had taken 3 weeks just to get this appointment. 3 weeks he couldn't afford to wait. And now the appointed hour had come, and here he was, still waiting. He suppressed the impulse to look at the clock again. After 3 weeks of waiting, another 10 minutes, no, 11, shouldn't matter, right? "Yes," Maribel was speaking into her headset now. "Okay, I'll send him in." She smiled at Jackson and said, "Ms. Waters can see you now. It's straight down the hall on the right." Finally. As Jackson walked past her desk, Maribel leaned forward a little and spoke in a stage whisper, "You're going to love Miss Waters. She's really nice." Jackson hoped that was true. As he took his seat, Jackson noticed a photo on Ms. Waters' desk of a young girl, 12 maybe, curled around a beautiful Russian blue cat, looking at the camera with big solemn eyes that said, "This is my cat. Nobody messes with my cat." The elegant blue stared at the camera too, with haunting green eyes that said, "This is my human. Nobody messes with my human." Jackson smiled. Maybe this meeting would go well after all. "So," the woman said, still looking down at the papers on her desk, "Mr. Hall." "Hill," said Jackson, already feeling defensive. She looked up. "Sorry?" "It's Hill, Jackson Hill." "Of course, Mr. Hill, Jackson. So," she sat back in her chair to give him her full attention, "tell me about your business." Showtime. "Sure. So we started with our first line of dry dog food 5 years ago. That was just for dogs, all different sizes and ages. And then within 6 months, we added a cat line." And he went on, just as he'd rehearsed it, chronicling how over the past 5 years he'd built his fledgling business into a respected brand. Of course, when he used the words "we started" and "we added," he was really talking about just himself, Jackson, working solo in his cramped little kitchen, late into the nights and over long weekends, experimenting, crafting, adjusting. Only the purest, as his company motto went, only the freshest, only the best. Jackson had in every sense built his business from his kitchen table. "Quite the entrepreneur," said Ms. Waters. He shifted in his seat, unsure exactly how to respond to that. Jackson had never intended to be a business owner. All he wanted was to see animals have the best food to eat. He just had to become an entrepreneur in order to do it. 6 years ago, he was working a sales job for an electronics outlet and hating it, cooking for himself, Walt, and Solomon. When he shared his natural dog food concoctions with a few friends who also lived with dogs, word got out. By the time he let go of his sales job to focus full-time on his pet food line, he had more than 100 customers and that widely respected brand. All of which could come crashing down exactly 1 week from today if he didn't get this contract.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?